Hello and welcome to C4 Discussions, where we engage in compassionate, clarifying, courageous conversations about real world issues and concerns, and where messy meets metaphysical. We are your hosts. I'm Ray,
And I'm James.
and let's begin. So, hello and welcome to episode 2 of C4 Discussions. James, what are we talking about today?
We are going to talk about toxic masculinity and toxic patriarchy. You want
Ah,
to just bottom line it for him there, Bray?
okay, yeah. Let's just to help folks out because sometimes people don't know exactly what we're referring to, so I think it might help them if we dive in a little bit deeper. So let's start with the first thing is, if we're going to talk about toxic masculinity, then it's helpful to understand, well, what is masculinity in the first place? So just a basic pause. Keep in mind, audience members, that if at any point you want to dive deeper with the slides, you can always contact James or I. We can send you the slides. You can take your time to read over them, so don't feel like you're pressured to try to read everything on the screen all at once. Just want to put that out there. So masculinity, just basically and simple, it is a social construct that encompasses the behavior, the roles, and the attributes typically associated with men and boys. Just a basic definition. One of the things that I liked about this particular professor's take is she highlighted four different types of, or four different masculinities. And these are the four. And once again, we're not going to dive deep into this, but I just want to give you an overview of there are different ways of looking at and understanding masculinity. Just so you know. So just based on that, anything you want to throw in there, James?
Nope. I think these slides are going to be really self-explanatory. Thanks, Ray.
Okay. So once again, just as a basic overview, so we are all communicating on the same page. If we're going to talk about toxic masculinity, we have to understand masculinity, but it also helps us to understand, well, then what is femininity? Basically, it is a social construct that encompasses the behaviors, roles, and attributes typically associated with women and girls. Now, there are no breakdown, or the professor didn't do a breakdown in the same way, because culture and society doesn't view, and that's going to be the topic of the conversation today, it doesn't deem or view femininity, masculinity in the same ball field. Like, it's not even in the same realm. So the way it breaks down is very different. Patriarchy, basically a system or a society of government in which the father or eldest male is the head of the family, etc. A system of society or government in which men hold the power and women are largely excluded from it. A society or community that is organized on patriarchal lines. Then there's a couple of examples. Now, anyone who's involved in the Judeo Christian background, you understand the concept of patriarchal lines, because all of the and such begat who begat who begat, they follow the masculine, they follow the patriarchal line. Just to say, that's an example of one way that it shows up. Once again, matriarchy, system or society governed or ruled by women, social organization which reckon through the female line. So you basically got the idea, I'm pretty sure. So once again, if we're talking about toxic, what are we talking about? The harmful ways, the tendencies, the behaviors, all of the ways that dominance and abuse and control show up in our culture and our society. That's basically what we are talking about today.
Very good. So thank you for that, Ray.
Yes, sir.
Um, so what I want to talk about next is the cultural environment. So how come we have this matriarchy and patriarchy? How come we have toxicity? Um, so as human beings, we live in an environment. Everyone's environment is different. And that environment is massively impactful on us. That environment basically shapes us in a massive way. If you think about it, schooling, church, friends, screen
Mm-hmm.
time, social media, what have you. Um, we're constantly bombarded by messages, and those
Mm-hmm.
messages form us. Um, so
Mm-hmm.
one metaphor is, I'm sure everyone's heard this metaphor. It's a really common one, but it's like the water to the fishes. The fish swim in the water, but they don't even know that the water's there because it's such a part of who they are.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the ways that cultural environment can impact us too. Is like we don't even know it's there. Another
Well,
metaphor is that if you put on a yellow pair of sunglasses, everything looks yellow, but then after a while, everything just looks normal. And that's what all of our training, all of the messages that are around us does. It's like it's invisible. It's like after we get used to the yellow sunglasses, all the information that's we're being bathed in, so to speak,
mm-hmm.
is invisible.
Mm-hmm. Very much
So
so.
yeah, I'm just gonna pass it back to you, Ray.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I know that there are a lot of people who don't really understand per se what you just very simply and very eloquently, very clearly identified is we're so immersed in it that we don't even realize we're immersed in it. And I just, I remind people, well, we do it all the time. Even with, okay, so we all learn to read and write and communicate the same way. We had to start learning the alphabet. But then we get to a point where we don't have to, okay, C, A, oh, T, uh, cat. Eventually, we get to a point where we see all three letters as one solid symbol, and we understand that to be cat. Well, same thing. So, what James and I are offering us to do is when we hit up against the terms masculinity, femininity, patriarchy, matriarchy, etc., break it back down to those simple elements to really understand, okay, so what does that even mean? Because we say the words, we throw them out there, we talk about it. Be a man. Okay, I hear you, but what does that mean? We have a lot of presumed indoctrinated ideas of what that means. Be a nice young lady. All of these things. I don't remember the rhyme, but what are little boys made of? Sticks and stones and worms and mud and whatever. And little girls are made of, cotton candy. And what is that based on? So, yes, thank you very much for putting it in those terms, James. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. So one of the things that Ray and I were talking about before this podcast started was colonialism. And this is a deeper dive, once again, it's a deeper dive into what forms us, what informs how we do life.
Mhm,
Um, so colonialism is a um, it's a term, but
mhm.
it's a way of being that we grew up with from hundreds of years ago. Um, and actually, Ray, can I pass it back to you? You're really good at this one.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's all good. Thank you. So the concept of just in general being colonized, you're being forced to fit into some prescribed cultural norm. In our culture, as James said, it's like the fish in the water. We're so immersed in it's like, well, I'm looking for water. What do you mean you're looking for water? I'm trying to find what you're swimming in it. We're so immersed in the colonial structure that we don't realize. So, as an example, which I had up on the screen a second ago, things like double standards when it comes to relationships and sex. Think about it. And I really mean, audience, pause and think about it. Culturally, when a man or a young boy entering into manhood, because this is going to be one of the things that ushers him into manhood, how many sexual conquests, how many sexual partners has the young man had? And it's usually a bravo. It's, yes, that's my boy. That's, notches on the belt kind of thing, which traces back to the idea of notches on the belt for when the gunslinger would shoot the bad guys, and you'd put a notch on the butt of the gun or a notch on the belt to count how many you put down. Follow the concept. Now, swap the gender out. When it's a young woman, do we bravo? Yes, my daughter has had 72 boyfriends and she's had sex with 70 of them thus far. We don't applaud that. We have other words for young women who do things like that. Words that start with an S or a W. All of that traces back to the concept of the colonial structure or colonization. Even the concept of the Salem witch trials, even that concept, just the fact that we refer to them as witches is part of the system. Why do we refer to them as witches? They were actually trials of women accused of witchcraft.
Mm.
But the colonial structure deems this the villain, this is the bad guy, this is the appropriate or non-appropriate behavior. And then we have very clear gender roles or gender stereotypes, which was the next slide. But this idea of if you're a man, this is how you act, this is how you behave, this is what you do. If you're a woman or female, this is what you do, how you behave, etc. And it's very ingrained in because, as James said, hundreds of years ago, our puritanical, Puritan, well, they weren't mine. My ancestors came over on a different boat, but you got the concept, right? But it goes back to Plymouth Rock and how all of this stuff was set up in the country of United States.
Yes. Thank you, Ray.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
and that's more of the water for the fishes for us, that we
Mm-hmm.
are indoctrinated in these colonial ways of being, these really structured ways of being from a long time ago, and
Mm-hmm.
they're sneaky. Um, the colonialism and the toxic patriarchy and the toxic masculinity, that stuff is sneaky. It's quite often it's programmed in our head from childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And as we're moving forward, a lot of people relate to those trainings, those mental loops, those mental tapes, if you will, relate to those as true or real. So
Mm-hmm.
as we're moving forward in our life and we're bumping up against things, we've got colonialism in our background, we've got patriarchy, we've got toxic masculinity in our background. One of the powerful things we can do is we can stop and notice ourselves. Quite often, it can happen in a conversation with somebody else. Somebody will say something, and there'll be a red flag over here. It's like, oh, no, that's not real. That's not true. X
Mm-hmm.
is the truth. And so
Mm-hmm.
we've got these pre-programmed structures, if you will, in our head about what's true and what's false, and also about what's right and what's wrong. A lot of the training that comes from colonialism, a lot of the training that leads to toxic patriarchy, is based in a real foundational way of being in our heads, that we want to be right and we want to make other people wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're inside that paradigm, when you're inside that, I'm going to call it an automatic machine, because I think everyone has this automaticity, has this automatic machine of wanting to be right and to make other people wrong. when we're in that mode, those old tapes, that the old programming that we had, um, are right, because we're relating to the training that we got from childhood or from our church or from our school or from our parents. We're relating to that training as right, and anyone that's not in that model, that's not in that rightness, is wrong. And when we're in that mode of I'm right and you're wrong, it's really easy to kill other people off, metaphorically usually, or with our words or what have you. I don't mean, realistically kill someone, but it's really easy to discount. Let's do it that way. It's really easy to discount somebody else if they're wrong.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. Very much so. And I don't know that the vast majority of us really understand the depth of where that or how that right and wrongness shows up in our regular everyday world, right? Just the idea of, and actually, I'm going to pull the slides up again. Just the idea of these traditional, that's the traditional, because what is a tradition? Something that goes back to eons ago of how we did things. Okay, so traditions of how we did things doesn't necessarily mean that's how we should still be doing things. But the concept, traditional gender stereotypes for the feminine, you're not supposed to be aggressive. You're supposed to be dependent. Women are generally deemed to be easily influenced. They're submissive. They're passive, home oriented, talkative, etc. If James and I were to hold like a game show right now and ask you how many on the opposite side can you now guess how many traditional masculine stereotypes do you think you can come up with in the next 3 seconds before we go? Start thinking. And now, okay, so how many did you get? Men deemed aggressive, independent, dominant, active, worldly, not at all talkative. Men are tough. Men are cruel. Men are blunt and not nurturing. You said what? Wait a minute. Wait. Why? Why would, wait. So, as James was saying, this concept of right and wrong. If a female, if a woman, if a young lady, a girl happens to be independent, we have words for that. Or she's more tough. We have words. She's a tomboy, right? We have concepts. That's not how little girls are supposed to behave. Based on what, though? Based on what James was saying, we have this concept of right and wrongness that was established way back when, based upon the puritanical, the Christian, and it was hyper Christian. It was very, and the colonial idea of this rightness and wrongness. Granted, some of it was rooted in being able to stay alive.
Yeah.
But once that was done, okay, we're settled now. Why women should be, I'll start the sentence off. Women should be barefoot,
Mm,
pregnant, and in the kitchen.
mm,
I still, it's 2025, James. I still hear
yeah.
men, I still hear women say this as though it's supposed to still be that way. That's the idea of, how insidious it is that this right and wrongness is still so pervasive. If a woman holds the door open or opens the door and holds it for a man, some men are insulted by that.
Mm,
The whole idea of when a woman comes to the table, if James and I are sitting at a table talking and a woman comes over to ask a question or to join us, we're supposed to stand up and then let her sit and then we sit. These are a lot of cultural traditional norms that we never even think about. And we're
yeah.
not saying that that's wrong. We're saying process it and ask yourself,
Yes.
why do I do this?
Yes.
And does this bleed into, in any kind of way, being toxic?
Mm,
Because that's the key thing. Any behavior in general is simply a behavior, right? Speaking, what did the slide say? Talkative. If you're talkative, it's simply you talk, you communicate. If it's too much, it's not life affirming. If it's too little, it's not life affirming. It's the ebb and flow in between. Well, that goes for everything
yeah.
in how we show up as the masculine, the feminine, the patriarchal, the matriarchal. Let's process how we move and navigate to be able to determine that line right there. That's where it's now toxic.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, I was doing some research yesterday, and one of the things I came across that I'd never heard of before is that there's been scientific studies with that when you put women together and they start sharing back and forth, oxytocin starts flowing through their system.
Mm-hmm,
Oxytocin is a chemical that we have in our head that is a healing um, chemical. Also, it
mm-hmm,
makes us feel good. And
mm-hmm.
so when women come together and they open their hearts and they share together, there's a healing that, or there can be a healing that takes place. Um, a lot of men don't have that. A lot of men are trained from early ages. I know I was. I was trained from an
Mm-hmm.
early age not to be emotional, not to share of myself, not to open my heart. Um, and so that's one of the other things about toxic masculinity and toxic patriarchy is that it's not unusual um, for men to get together and start gossiping basically about how women are constantly talking. Or how many times have you heard a man talk about how their partner, I come home from work and all they want to do is talk at me, all they want to do is talk you know so that knowledge of, here, I'm going to do it this way, honoring women when they come together to share. And then as a man, if you have male energy, if a woman wants to speak with you and share, my invitation is that you take a breath and listen. Listening is almost always more of a feminine trait, and talking and controlling is often more of a masculine trait. And as I'm going to do it this way. And as men or people with male energy notice and process, like Ray was talking about, as we process how we do things, as we process the right wrong machine in our head, as we
Mm-hmm.
process that colonial idea about how it's wrong for women to talk so much, or how it's wrong for a woman to want to talk to a man.
I think, thank you for that, James. And I think one of the interesting things is I don't, I don't know that most men really know or understand that it's not necessarily the quantity. We say it's the quantity of women talk too much. Put a group of men in a room together to talk about football, baseball, some sports team, some wrestler that they love, the horses, the something that men really, and men are running their mouths. So it's not a matter of talking too much. It goes to what you were saying. Generally, when women are speaking or communicating, it's from the heart.
Yes.
Men, it's from the head. So when a woman says, we'll just stereotypical setup. Honey, how was your day? Fine. So what she's asking or what she's inferring is, can we sit down and share? What did your day? How'd your day go? How did you feel? It's an open-hearted inviting one another into the space of
Mm,
versus talking at,
mm,
right? As James said, the stereotypical idea is women listen, men don't. Men listen, we just don't listen with our hearts because we're not trained to do so. Women are taught, it's part of that indoctrination to be caring, and we make it about child rearing and childbirth. It's that and more, because you can be nurturing and have nothing to do with children, because there are many farmers who care for their livestock like pets. They are very nurturing and care for. There are a lot of people who have dogs and cats as pets, and they're very nurturing, very caring and loving of the, and I'm talking about men.
Yeah.
So we have it. We just don't often access it in the same ways.
Yeah.
And that's what James is inviting, is pause and sit back
Mm.
and process. Okay, so what are some of the things that I was taught as a man, as a young boy, that I now, as a man, still cling to, that is actually giving me an ulcer, or
Yes.
it's what's causing high blood pressure because I don't talk about my feelings. I don't share my feelings. I don't even know if I'm in tune with them because I have for so long stuffed them down and stuffed them down and stuffed them down, or compartmentalized them, that I'm not even connected with them to be able to process them. So therein lies the invitation.
Yes.
Get to know yourself and open up to break down all of those toxic ideas of big boys don't cry and be a man and man up and all of these phrases that move through our lexicon and our consciousness, that, based on what James said, when he said, once again, this is the game show, folks. I'm quizzing you. When James said, studies have been done that say when groups of women get together and they are fellowshipping, they are communicating and collaborating with one another, he mentioned a specific hormone that is released through the body. You remember what the hormone was, anybody? Oxytocin. Oxytocin is as James said, it's the feel good hormone that moves through the body, that gives us the ability to connect more deeply. It gives us the ability to move and navigate through stressful times more effectively. It's often referenced or called the cuddle hormone because of what it evokes in a person when we touch, right?
Mm.
It's healing. It's
Yes.
healing is my
Yes.
point. If men are not releasing that hormone, what are we denying ourselves of?
Oh,
Right? Because if we're not releasing oxytocin, then what are we releasing into our system? There are other what do we say? What do we say? Hormones, chemicals that move through the body more predominantly in men. If oxytocin is women, cortisol is men,
yes.
the stress hormone.
Yes.
That's not balanced. That's not healthy.
Yeah. Thank you, Ray.
Hmm.
So in my late 20s, I took a seminar, and it was just an amazing seminar where I did a bunch of transformational growth. And at the end of the seminar, I was hugging one of my friends, and I grabbed hold of him and I squeezed him really hard. And he whispered in my ear and said, "Relax, get present to what's happening right here and right now." And when he said that, this cascade went through me. And I realized that when I'm hugging on someone, it didn't matter who it was. I'm just I'm just hugging as hard as I can.
Hmm.
And I'm not present in the moment. So my dad, when I was a kid, my dad, that's how he hugged. And so I thought that that was the normal way that you hug. And as this guy's whispering in my ear, relax, get present in the moment. What are you feeling? What's happening in your body right now? I realized that every time I hugged, up until it was like I was 29, up until I was like 29 years old, I'd never experienced a hug before. I'd never been present in the moment for, like Ray was just talking about the touch that can bring that oxytocin to the forefront. So my dad was trained from his dad to be a control freak, to not have any access to his feelings whatsoever. And he trained me that way. And when I was doing this transformational seminar when I was 29, I started taking some of that stuff apart. A lot of the stuff that my dad taught me was colonialism. A lot of the stuff that my dad taught me was toxic patriarchy. I'm just going to be bold here, to be straight up. My dad grew up; he was a hillbilly in Missouri, in the Missouri Ozarks, and he shared with me. I think I was like a teenager. He shared with me that, James, I didn't see a black person until I went into the army in World War II. He literally was surrounded by white people his entire life until he went into the army. And he said, James, I'm racially prejudiced. And when he told me that, my head kind of exploded, because he did not train me or my two brothers that way at all. He did not train us to be racially prejudiced. But it took a lot of work on his part not to pass that on, not to pass that colonialism on to his three boys.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. Because there are a lot of hand-me-down consciousness, hand-me-down traditions, hand-me-down words. The concept, people would say, when I grow up, I'm going to be so different from my mom and dad, or so different from my parents, or whatever. And then a lot of people reach a certain age and they realize, when did I turn into my parents? Because
Yeah.
they catch themselves saying something that their mother said, or they catch themselves saying something that their father said. Close the door, boy. We ain't trying to put the air conditioner out in the street. Why am I, what, we don't even have an air conditioner. What am I talking about? Why
Yeah.
am I,
Yes.
I used to walk uphill both ways to school, and y'all kids don't know. Why are we doing that?
Yeah.
Because it is so ingrained in the caste system of who's at the bottom, who's at the top, and everything that goes in that entire mixture of. And like I said before, there are so many insidious and
Mm,
subtle ways that
yeah.
we push this onto one another. Just the idea of men are supposed to be smart when it comes to money and women aren't. And we've heard this in recent political eras of, well, boys will be boys when it comes to certain kinds of behavior that is abusive or aggressive or unacceptable. We have all kinds of things. The wife, if the husband comes home from work or whatever, and the husband or the boyfriend wants to make love, the woman, she's not allowed to say no. Based on what, though? Based on that colonial idea, that whole caste system of toxic masculinity, toxic patriarchy. The whole deal of it is about dominance, control. And if we don't pause, as James said, when the embrace with the friend, be present,
Mm,
check in and ask ourselves, what's driving my behavior? What's driving the way that I think about women or men? What's driving, because a lot of the things that are driving us when it comes to that are the same things that are driving anti-LGBTQ rhetoric and behaviors. And it's predominantly because of how we have made women or the feminine
mm,
subordinate and weak. So we vilify. We've created a boogeyman when there doesn't need to be a boogeyman, simply because somebody who handed me this book of, oh, so if someone hits me, I have to man up and hit them harder, and aggression. And if they get a bomb, I have to get two bombs. And if they get three, I have to. Toxicity. Very
yes.
harmful.
Yes. So, can you pull up the Barbie quote?
Yes, sir.
So as I've been researching this topic for a long time, and um, one of the things that I came across when the Barbie movie came out was America Fierro, I think is how she says her last name, um, had this amazing quote in the movie. And um, actually, I'm going to pull mine up because I can't read that one. One moment. Where is it? Anyway, she had this amazing quote. Hey, Ray, can you read that quote?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When it comes, I'm going to finish the setup here. Um, she had this amazing, it was a monologue basically. And she's talking about the normal environment for people who have feminine energy, specifically in this country, but a lot of other countries on this planet as well. And she's talking about the day-to-day life of people with feminine energy.
It is literally impossible to be a woman. You are so beautiful and so smart, and it kills me that you don't think you're good enough. Like we have to always be extraordinary, but somehow we're always doing it wrong. You have to be thin, but not too thin. And you can never say you want to be thin. You have to say you want to be healthy, but also you have to be thin. You have to have money, but you can't ask for money because that's crass. You have to be a boss, but you can't be mean. You have to lead, but you can't squash other people's ideas. You're supposed to love being a mother, but don't talk about your kids all the damn time. And you have to be a career woman, but you also always be looking out for other people. You have to answer for men's bad behavior, which is insane. But if
Yeah.
you point that out, you're accused of complaining. You're supposed to stay pretty for men, but not so pretty that you tempt them too much or that you threaten other women because you're supposed to be a part of the sisterhood. But always stand out and always be grateful. But never forget that the system is rigged. So find a way to acknowledge that, but also always be grateful.
Mm,
You have to never get old, never be rude, never show off, never be selfish, never fall down, never fail, never never show fear, never get out of line. It's too hard. It's too contradictory, and nobody gives you a medal or says thank you. And it turns out, in fact, that not only are you doing everything wrong, but also everything is your fault. I'm just so tired of watching myself and every single other woman tie herself into knots so that people will like us. And if all of that is also true for a doll just representing women, then I don't even know.
yes. Yes. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've heard
Yeah,
many.
that was a powerful scene in the film.
Yeah, I've heard many women talk about how they're constantly surrounded. They're constantly surrounded, and they have no wiggle room. They're constantly. An example is the glass ceiling for women in business. Is like many women bump up against this glass ceiling, and they can't make any more money, or they can't get a higher position in
Mhm.
business. And that quote that Ray just read is a powerful glimpse for people like me who has male energy into the life of someone who has feminine energy and literally is crushed. I might be exaggerating a little bit here, but I'm just going to keep going. A lot of women are literally crushed by all the different toxic patriarchy and all the toxic masculinity that surrounds them and keeps them caged up.
Mhm. I mean, just the concept when the movie came out, and I heard several people, whether it was in the LGBTQ community talking about it because it came up, whether it was in other community settings, with the deaf community, a lot of women were amen, like, yes, that's it. Because the concept is, for the average man, when do we go to a mirror and look in the mirror and be like, oh, I'm gaining too much weight, or nobody's gonna like me, or we've got a thing within the male culture where a dad bod, a dad body, is when the man gets to a certain degree out of shape. He's got a little pudge and whatnot, and it's a dad bod, and that's like, oh yes, he's got a dad bod. But the woman can't do that.
Mm.
She has a certain standard she has to fit in, and that standard is so rigid. Of, if she hits here, it's too thin. If she hits here, it's generally too thick. And this is also predicated based upon various ethnic cultures, because their standards for beauty, it moves and stuff, because, as James said, that colonial construct says that this is beautiful. So now, when you get into a community of someone of color, we'll say African American community, the women here and the women here, they're not built the same. But if you try to take this beauty standard and put it here, it doesn't work. Over here, the women are generally the men desire them to be a little thicker. But why? It's still the same idea. What's going on in the consciousness of the man who says, I like a little meat on my woman? What does that mean? Where is that coming from? The whole idea of, what can a woman do to simply move through life of her own accord without a group of men saying, you're not allowed to decide for your own body. We know better. What man knows better? Explain that to me.
Yeah.
Because it's the colonial construct, it's male dominance, it's toxic patriarchy, it's all of that that says, oh, we know we're smarter than you. We're closer to God than you. So we're the ones that make the decisions. That's why we didn't want women in the Supreme Court. And that's why we don't want women here. And women shouldn't be in the military because you're all so weak. And we're gonna have to save you. And all of that is part of the construct. That is a fallacy. It's a lie. If we don't deconstruct the lie and we don't neutralize the toxicity, then we're going to continue to perpetuate systems and structures that hurt our children, who become teenagers who are hurt, who become adults who are hurt. And as we often say in the New Thought communities, hurt people hurt people. Healed people heal people.
Yes.
So our invitation is, how do we heal this stuff within us? As James shared the story of his dad, the interesting thing is, in my family, my father was actually more affectionate than my mother was,
Huh.
which was very interesting. And I don't know if that's partly because when he ended up being diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease, if him becoming the feminine role, because he's now at home, he can't go to work, which meant my mother now, I mean, she had always worked, but she had to take on more work. So she worked in a bar as a barmaid. She cleaned people's houses. She did a lot of stuff. So she became the primary breadwinner of the
Mm.
home. So my father was the one predominantly cooking food and, taking care of me and my older brothers and whatnot. So, but it's interesting, even then, how I later interpreted, because of, when I was molested and a whole bunch of stuff, I interpreted hugging and contact, even something as simple as a handshake. My mind immediately made it sexual. So that by the time I then had sons, I had to undo all of that programming, because my oldest son, he would want a hug and I wouldn't give him one
Mm.
because in my mind, it was connected to sex. So I shunned him for a while until what did we say? Till I neutralized the toxicity and my programming through therapy and a whole bunch of stuff to the point where we're good now. Like I hug and I give him a kiss and all kind. My grandkid, like it's now my grandson fights back because he's like, ah, but
Yeah.
that's being a teenage boy. But we have to neutralize this if we're going to heal. We have to.
Yes. So one other thing I bumped across several years ago was another study where a woman noticed that in like New York City or whatever, a big city,
Mhm.
on sidewalks, men would just keep on walking straight through a woman, and the woman was just automatically, subconsciously, on the men's part, expected to move out of the way. And so what this lady did is she set up a study where she was walking down sidewalks and she would just keep her straight line walking, and a man would come at her, and instead of moving out of the way like almost everyone around her, all the women around her were doing, she continued moving straight ahead, and the man would literally run into her, and often the man would be shocked. It
Mhm.
was like he would kind of wake up, like he wasn't really present, and he'd be shocked. It's like, whoa, what just happened?
Uh-huh.
Something unusual just happened. And that happened to her a lot as she was doing this study, is that many men ran into her because of that toxic masculinity, that toxic patriarchy. I'm the man, therefore you have to get out of my way if you have feminine energy.
Yes, yes. And as I said before, like that ties directly into the caste system in terms of both gender, the woman's supposed to move, but it also ties into the racial aspect because if a white person was walking down the sidewalk, then the black person was expected to move. So once again, all of these things are so deeply intertwined into one another that it's, for me at least, and I'm sure for James as well, it's so easy to see that the toxicity isn't relegated to only one area or one gender or one ethnicity and race. This toxicity that we're talking about has infiltrated every area of our culture and society. We see it in movies. Because, for example, if I were to ask you, audience, yes, yes, Ray is asking, we're at a quiz again. You're being so. How many movies have you ever seen where you've seen the woman pretty much completely nude? You've seen her from the back and the front. And I'm not talking about X rated movies, I'm talking about regular PG or R movies. How many men have you seen in the same setting? Far fewer.
Yeah.
Why? Because of what we're talking about. Same thing. We can identify things on television and how we perpetuate these ideas in movies and films. We can identify there have been several movies recently, superhero movies specifically, where the women were the star. When for Marvel, when the Black Widow movie came out, there were a whole lot of people, yeah, it's not going to do that well because it's a woman lead in a superhero movie. That's not going to work. Based on what? When Wonder Woman came out, and actually, I even heard people complain because Gal Gadot was more covered than Linda Carter, and people were mad that
Oh.
she had more on. If you saw the movie, it's not like she was wearing a suit of armor like Iron Man. She was still pretty much wearing a bikini. Who goes to war in a bikini? Why is a woman dressed in such a way to fight in a war? Because of how that toxicity deems. Because if you put a man, in that same kind of setting, same kind of You know, Robin Hood, or not Robin Hood, Robin from Batman and Robin back in the day, he was pretty much in a bikini, very, very short pants. And a lot of men were like, wow, you know, he looks like a little girl and all the other. Follow the line, people, follow the line, because we are very quick to bring in these stereotypes and ideas and things, and we keep the ball of this colonial structure rolling and rolling and rolling, and every time it rolls, somebody gets crushed underneath the weight of it. Some young woman, some young boy, somebody is getting crushed under the wheel of this thing that we keep pushing to keep it rolling.
Yeah. Thank you. Well said. So I'm curious what we can do about this. We've talked about processing and observing and noticing our behavior, observing and noticing and processing how we think, observing and noticing, um, um, just how we do things, how we live our life. Um, yeah, there's an amazing man. Once again, I can't read that quote. So after after I do the setup, would you read that?
I got you.
Cool, cool. Yeah. So uh, Dr. Ginwright, Shawn Ginwright, wrote this amazing book that was very, very simple, yet it was extraordinarily powerful. And quite often I notice that when things are simple, they can be extraordinarily powerful. As I read this book, it took me apart in many different ways. I got to examine lots of those automatic behaviors of being right and making other people wrong. Um, and this one specifically was really powerful for me, this particular quote.
So in the book, he references certain, once again, the idea of there are lies that we have been conditioned to believe. And so the lie number two that he speaks to is the more power we have, the more change we can create. Dealing with our addictions, insecurities, and unresolved conflicts is way harder than making people aware of the dangers of climate change or fighting against racist policies. Pause and breathe that in.
Yeah, really.
Dealing with our addictions, insecurities, and unresolved conflicts is way harder than making people aware of the dangers of climate change or fighting against racist policies.
Mm,
But when we don't turn inward to deal with our own stuff, we build up this false idea about power and ultimately build movements with wounded warriors.
yeah.
Our real power comes from the courage to deal with our fractured relationships,
Mm,
the vulnerability to acknowledge our hurt feelings, and the awareness to know when our ego shows up.
thank you.
Yes, sir.
So, as a white male, I'm 6'2", I'm a big white male. I quite often, um, I have privilege that I don't even know about. I've been hanging out with Ray for quite a long time now, and he's been an amazing teacher for me. Um, Referencing that quote, it's talking about looking at those parts of each one of us. We all have them. We all have a shadow side, if you will. We all have challenge areas. Um, and as we look at these things, as we dive deep into us, it can be extraordinarily freeing for us and for everyone around us. So Dr. Ginwright's inviting us to what I call doing the work,
Hmm.
whatever that looks like. It's different for everyone. Everyone has a different way of doing that. Sometimes it's
Hmm.
going to church, sometimes it's a therapist, sometimes, whatever, talking to a really close friend.
Hmm.
But doing that work, noticing when the shadow side comes up and we want to ignore it. We want to think that, oh, that shadow is just a natural part of who I am. I can't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
When
Mm-hmm.
those challenge areas come up internally, the invitation is to take a breath, do the work, and heal yourself.
Amen. Well said. Well said. And to that, there was a time when I was, if you can believe it or not, James, I don't know if you knew this, but I'm pretty sure you do. There was a time in my life when I was extremely homophobic. And just to our audience, in case you missed episode 1, generally I don't refer to the word homophobia anymore. I use homomisia for the majority of the people that we normally would label as homophobic. And I do that because it's not fear, it's actually hatred. So
Mm,
I call a thing a thing.
mm,
But nonetheless, growing up, I was extremely terrified. So it was homophobia
mm.
because of how I was indoctrinated into Christianity and all this other stuff, and homosexuality is a sin. And we could go through that's a whole series of episodes right there. But
Yes, it is.
for years, this is the energy that I'm navigating in. Now, I don't know about you, but how does someone who is gay navigate an gay phobia life with ease and grace? How does one live with self care and self worth when you hate yourself and you're afraid that you're going to hell because so you have to close off, you have to block off parts of you in order to fit in and move through life the way everybody else moves through life. Then you have to start crafting lies about girlfriends and interests because you got to fit in. You got locker talk. You can't make them realize and know that because oh my, so I reached a point where critical mass hit
Mm,
and couldn't deal with it anymore. And so as James said, sometimes it's church, wasn't for me, not then, because that was a place where some trauma happened regarding Bible bashing and stuff. But therapy. And I ended up in therapy simply because I observed, not simply, but because I observed a murder and was traumatized by it. And that led me to going to therapy. And in therapy, I started to be able to unpack all of the things regarding my sexuality, which then transformed me. And now, fast forward years later, I'm a completely different person now, to James's point. Wax on, wax off. We have to do the work to heal. We have to do the work. And when we heal, because James has done his work, because Ray has done and continue to do our work, we are then able to do things that help others. The fact that we are doing and have done our work is what makes this podcast possible.
yes.
Because 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we were in a very different headspace that this would not be the conversation we were having with y'all. So the invitation is find out for yourself, what does it mean to detoxify, to get these poisonous concepts, ideas, paradigms, behaviors out of your system so that you are then living, moving, and having greater agency as a healing body rather than someone who is continuing to pass the torch of, here, my children, I am giving you the torch that my great, great, and great, and great, great, and grandfather, father gave to me. We call it the colonial structure of enslavement. Here,
Mm,
it's time to drop that torch and let the flame go out.
yes. Yes. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mm, that felt like a pretty powerful ending to me. Do you have anything else, Ray?
Yes, I have one last thing to close us out with, and it's just the idea of what it looks like to step into the space of neutralizing toxic patriarchy, toxic masculinity, etc. And it's to start exploring the ideas of rather than it being either or
Mm,
male, female, how about we talk about both and either, neither. How do we find balance in whatever the gender expression is? Because when we're in this space, we are far more capable of wrapping our arms around everyone,
Mm,
even the young boy that
yeah.
someone may say, oh, he's so effeminate, he must be gay. Well, number one, he might not be, but whether he is or isn't, release the ideas of what that means when you start thinking about those predetermined, stereotypical, indoctrinated ideas. Let him or let her or
Mm,
let them inform you when they are at such an age that rather than putting it onto them. Breathe.
yes, thank you.
And
Whew.
so with that, I guess episode 2 comes to a close. So we just would like to remind you that if this, was meaningful to you in any way, feel free to reach out and continue the conversation with either James or I. You can reach us via our email addresses. Feel free to click into the chat box below. Feel free to share with family, friends, colleagues, the other guys in the locker, etc. Feel free to, engage us more. And just as a quick note, I'll let James introduce our next episode featuring our first interview. James?
Woohoo! Yeah, Christina will be participating in our podcast next time. And Christine, excuse me, Christine is a pretty close friend of mine. I've known her for years and years. And she is a powerful being on the planet. And she's a powerful woman on the planet. And she is an expert at trans culture. The trans culture is huge, and she's very beautifully, how do I say it? She beautifully crafts conversations around the trans culture. And Ray and I will be interviewing Christine. Christine Monks is her name. We'll be interviewing her next time. And so I invite you to come back and play with us. I invite you to to play inside this conversation about what is it to be a trans person and what is it to be to honor a trans person.
Amen. Amen. Thank you very much, James. Appreciate that. Looking forward to that. And before we go out, just to share with folks, here are some resources. And as I said, feel free to, if you ever want copies of, feel free to reach out. Make sure you get PDF of stuff or PowerPoint if you prefer. But just know that there are ways, there are people, there are places, there are many resources where we can gather together individually and collectively in order to do this work. So we bless you on your journey. We bless you as you continue to do the work, continue to wax on, wax off.
Yes.
We bless you as we heal the planet. And to my beloved brother James, thank you once again for this amazing conversation. I appreciate you. Looking forward to our next one.
Thank you, Ray. I honor you. Blessings all.